We'll kick off right away, and I'd like to introduce the Dean, Lagos Business School, Pan-Atlantic University, Professor 𝘚𝘁𝘐𝑴 𝘠𝑑𝑎𝑣𝑑, who would come up and introduce our guests and give a welcome remark. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First, let me start by apologizing for the late start. As you know, in LBS, one of our tenets is about timekeeping, but when we have externals coming in, we always have to be mindful that, Lagos traffic is a monster in itself, and we can't really be in control of what goes on in Lagos. So, Your Excellency, Ambassador Gautier Mignot, distinguished members of the EU delegation, esteemed colleagues, faculty and staff of Lagos Business School, our students, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to Lagos Business School, and in particular to extend our heartfelt appreciation to His Excellency Ambassador Gautier Mignot, the European Union Ambassador to Nigeria and ECOWAS, for honoring us with this important visit. We are indeed privileged to host you today as part of your national lecture tour themed The European Union, a reliable partner for Nigeria and the world. The theme is not only timely, but deeply read aspirations. Your Excellency, your presence here today speaks volumes. It signifies the European Union's enduring commitment to dialogue and partnership, not only as a slogan, but as a practical strategy for shared growth. Over the years, the EU has demonstrated this commitment through substantial investments in human capital, governance reform, public health, education, and innovation ecosystems across the continent. As you might be aware, Your Excellency, Lagos Business School started with a focus on developing responsible leaders for the private sector. However, over time, we have expanded our scope to include the public sector through the establishment of the 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑗𝑎𝑏𝑒 Public Sector Initiative, because we believe that Nigeria cannot grow or change if we only stop at the private sector level. We need to move beyond private sector and ensure that the public sector are well informed to create an enabling environment. This evolution stems from our recognition that the private sector cannot thrive in isolation. A functional and effective public sector is essential to creating the enabling environment necessary for sustainable business growth to achieve inclusive and sustainable development. In this regard, we're keen to explore meaningful partnerships with the European Union, particularly in the areas of public sector research, development, and capacity building. We're particularly encouraged by your emphasis on education and research, two pillars that underpin sustainable progress in any society. At LBS, we are witness to the transformative impact of knowledge when impaired with integrity and leadership. Through our research centers, executive education, and custom programs, the MBA and policy-focused initiatives like the Sustainable and Inclusive Digital and Financial Services Initiative, SIDFS, the Public Sector Initiative, our Sustainability Center, and the Business Innovation Center, among others. We are working to build a generation of African leaders who can solve problems not just for today, but with foresight and a sense of responsibility for the future. As you engage with our students, faculty, and alumni today, we trust you will find a community eager to listen, ready to collaborate, and open to long-term collaboration. We believe this visit is not a moment of engagement, but a gateway to future partnerships in the areas of education, public sector development, digital innovation, and entrepreneurship. In closing, I wish to thank the entire delegation of the European Union to Nigeria and ECOWAS for your leadership and goodwill. We hope that today's session is both insightful and enriching for all. We are honored to be part of your journey in promoting stronger EU-Nigeria relations, and we look forward to building on this engagement in the months ahead. Once again, Your Excellency, welcome to the Lagos Business School. Thank you for listening. So before I leave the stage, I would like to read the citation of His Excellency Gautier Mignot, the Ambassador of the EU to Nigeria and ECOWAS. Gautier Mignot holds a management degree from 𝘓𝘂𝘃 Business School, so he's one of us, right? And is an alumni and he's also an alumni of the École Nationale d'Administration, ENA in France. And I think I'll add also, he's the chapter lead for the 𝘓𝘃 Business School community in Nigeria as well. He has been a member of the French diplomatic service since 1995 and has been seconded to the European Union since 2021. In the first part of his career, he worked mainly on EU affairs, coordinating in particular the French EU Council presidency in Brussels in 2008. He was thereafter Deputy Head of Mission of France to Senegal and Deputy Director for Global Affairs and International Cooperation at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He has also served 10 years in Latin America, most recently as French Ambassador to Colombia, 2017 to 2020, and EU Ambassador to Mexico, 2021 to 2024. On September 1, 2024, he was assigned as EU Ambassador to Nigeria and ECOWAS. So ladies and gentlemen, let me invite His Excellency Ambassador Gautier Mignot to deliver his own keynote address titled The European Union, a Reliable Partner for Nigeria and the World. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much, Madam Dean, Professor Yinka David West, for your kind words of welcome and warm greetings to all the board members, scholars, and of course all the students here present. And first of all, indeed an apology for coming a little bit late. I came all the way down from the airport, flying from Abuja this morning, and it took a little bit longer than we planned. But perhaps we have a solution for that. I will come back to this later. Indeed, I am myself an ex-business school student, so I feel very much at home here, and very happy to be again in this atmosphere, you know, very special of, I think, all the business school, of people very curious, not only about business, but to learn about the world, understand how things work, and always very resourceful people, very full of sense of entrepreneurship. And after this business school, I joined the public service, the civil service in France, but I've always had the conviction that it is very important for civil servants to be business literate, if I may say so. And the basic skills I acquired on marketing or finance or accounting, statistics during my studies have always been very useful for me as a diplomat. So I would like first to share some remarks on the partnership that the EU is offering to Nigeria and to the world and is seeking with your country. But more than anything, looking very much forward to exchanging with you after this and hearing your comments and questions. We live in a world which is more and more complex, surrounded by more and more information and disinformation, where narratives tend to replace realities, influencers replace journalists or scholars, and short posts replace long surveys or theses. And you can see around the planet how concerns, fears spread among people. And fear is never a good advisor. And I think this is linked to the global threats. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, a shortage of natural resources, which are threatening human life on this planet in the middle to long term. And of course, many people are also facing much more immediate challenges of security, of poverty, even hunger. And all these problems are linked. And climate change is not so much an issue for rich people or rich countries, as you sometimes hear, but on the contrary, it hits more than anything the most vulnerable, nations or people. And then questions rise more and more on the disruptive effects of digital technologies, now artificial intelligence. And we see how we see growing inequalities also around the world to the benefits of very, very, very few, most well-off. And to face these challenges, the world needs to perform a triple transition: green, digital, and inclusive. Green, so that we adjust our models of production, consumption, and exchange to what nature can absorb. Digital, to make sure that these new technologies are at the service of all human beings and not only at the service of a few owners of big tech companies, especially to make sure that the upcoming AI revolution will benefit to all of us. And inclusive, because we need to make sure that our prosperity is not confiscated by a happy few, but is equally shared among nations and categories of people. And we live, of course, in a more and more globalized world, where the problems are transboundary and the solutions also are global. Of course, each nation bears its own responsibility and cannot rely on others to fix its problems, but cooperation is needed more than ever. And instead, what we are witnessing, especially in the last few months, is rather the contrary. Is a new rise of power politics, where the motto is crush your neighbor, even your ally, if he's less powerful than you, twist his arm, and impose your national egoist interests. And this is a model that the European Union rejects. And why? Because we were precisely founded exactly on the contrary, on a model for ourselves and for international relations based on equality, respect, and cooperation. The EU was built 75 years ago, on 9th of May 1950. That was the founding act of the European integration, the Schuman Declaration, after a profound trauma of 2 world wars. And what led us to these world wars were an addiction to power politics. And on 9th of May 1950, we decided to quit this addiction and promote cooperation rather than rivalry, sovereignty shared rather than clashing sovereignties. We decided to discard domination, exploitation among ourselves, and rather promote equality between member states and citizens. And we realized that we would be stronger together to fix the problems we had in common. And it's even more important now in the 21st century, where as individual nations, we represent just a tiny bit of humanity, but together we can have our say in the concert of nations. And our union is based first on values: democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights. It is based on institutions, which are very important. Nothing lasting can be done without institutions. And in particular, we have a European Parliament elected by the people every 5 years. It is based on the rights for citizens, the 4 liberties: liberty of movement of goods, of services, of capitals, and more importantly of people. No tariffs. That's also one of our basic principles. And we are a union based on law, with a specific jurisdictional system encompassing, in fact, all the courts and tribunals in all our member states to enforce EU law and make sure that every citizen, every company can exercise the rights recognized by EU laws, treaties, and regulations. We also have budgets, financing programs in many different areas. And we have just starting a big negotiation in the EU, which will be the negotiation of our next multi-annual financial framework. We have a 7-year multi-annual financial framework, and the current one is finishing in 2027, and the European Commission has just moved forward its proposal for the next one from 2028 to 2034, a proposal of almost 2 trillion euros of worth, which now has to be discussed and approved by our member states and by our European Parliament. And the results of these 75 years of European integration have been tremendously positive. Because today a war between our member states has become unthinkable, and we have managed to build a combination of shared prosperity, social rights, and civil liberties, which is quite unique in the world. And we have an attractive model. We have grown from 6 founding member states to 27 today. We have 450 million inhabitants, over 4.2 million square kilometers. And our GDP is comparable with the GDP of the USA or China. And moreover, the EU is attractive. We have 9 candidate countries knocking at the door of the EU to join the club, to become members, and they will certainly become members in the next few years, at least some of them. And we are also a continent attractive. We are the most attractive continent for people from abroad, be them tourists, migrants, or students. And we also have a strong diplomatic network proper to the EU, some 145 embassies that we call delegations, like the one I have the honor to head here in Nigeria. And of course, we work hand in hand with our member states. 19 of our 27 member states have embassies here in Nigeria, in Abuja, and some have also consulate general here in Lagos. So our role as EU delegation also to coordinate all member states' embassies and act together as Team Europe. But we're also very aware of the challenges the EU is facing. And especially 2 big challenges, which are our competitiveness that we need to reinforce. We see that we are lagging behind compared with the US and China in competitiveness, in innovation. And the second one is our autonomic strategy. We need to invest more in our security. And basically, the proposal I was referring a minute ago of the new multi-financial framework try to focus on these 2 areas in particular. And this in a context of budgetary constraints. We have huge public deficits that we need to reduce in our member states, and of course it also will impact the finance of the EU. And an aging population, a dropping demography, which is another challenge, which is not new, but has, over the last few years, not only in the EU, in many other countries in the world, accelerated very sharply. And what we want to do with the rest of the world, basically, is to extend the same recipe that has made our success. Because we think that this is also in our best interest. Cooperation, equal rules for all, respect for other nations' rights and legitimate interests, negotiation processes to settle divergences of interests, respect of rights of individuals, and shared prosperity with strong innovation capacities. And we are traditionally the first provider of official development aid in the world. More or less 42% of the ODA comes from the EU and its member states. And we were proudly awardee of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011. And we believe very much in a rules-based order, based on the United Nations Charter, and we reject the law of the strongest. This doesn't mean that we defend the statu quo. We are very much aware of the necessity to reform the functioning of multilateral institutions to make them fairer, politically and financially, and take into account the fact that the world has profoundly changed since last century. And there are many new players, big or small, that must have their fair share in decision-making in particular. And we promote a society model based on respect for cultural and religious differences, based on tolerance, based on civil liberties, efficient market economy, and social inclusion. And we are also championing the cause of the triple transition. Internally, the big motto of the previous legislature in the EU 2019 to 2024 was the EU Green Deal. And it still is something very important, but we want to adjust it also to our competitiveness. And we want also to extend this offer to the world, and we are also leader in particular in climate finance internationally. So this is, I think, a powerful offer that we are trying to update, and I will come to this in a few minutes. And this is also why some of our rivals try to undermine us, propagating lies and disinformations, in particular here in West Africa, about what we are and what we stand for. And this comes in particular from one country, which is the Russian Federation and its proxies in the region. So which interests is the EU pursuing in Africa and in Nigeria in particular? And I think we are very transparent on our interests. Our basic interest in the region is to foster sustainable development, sustainable investments, opportunities, and jobs. Why? Because our basic interest is for this region to be stable, sustainable, and prosperous. Why? Because we have a special relationship based on historical links, human links, cultural links, but more than anything, the fact that we are geographically neighbors. And so it means that everything that happens here impacts us, positively or negatively. And it is true in the other sense. If Europe is doing good, I think it could be good for West Africa too. If we are doing not good, it will impact negatively also this region. And at a time when other partners are winding down their support, the EU, on the contrary, keeps its commitments, stays its course. We have this financial framework up to 2027. And this is why we think we are reliable partners. Partners in this fast-changing world, this kind of partner upon whom you know you can count. And we think that our interests are clear and coincide with Nigeria's and Africa's. Now, of course, we totally respect Africa and Nigeria's rights and choice to also have other partners. It's not about an exclusive partnership. And we are certainly not the only ones reliable. But it is important to choose your partners with open eyes, to look at who they are, how they behave at home and internationally, and in your country, and compare between partners. So how do we partner together, and how do we want to partner together? Today, contrary to sometimes what you read also on social networks, things like that, the EU's economy depends very little on Africa. And this we would like to see change. We will have to have much more economic links with Africa, and with West Africa and Nigeria in particular. In fact, we are by far the largest foreign direct investor on the African continent. FDI stock from the EU in Africa is some $310 billion. China and the US, each one have a little bit more than 50 billion. But in fact, if you compare with investments that we have in other parts of the world, it's not that much. In Mexico, for instance, when I was posted before coming here, the EU had almost $150 billion of investment. So half what we have just in Mexico, what we have in all Africa. And in Nigeria, we have around a little bit more than $20 billion. So see a big gap between, for instance, Nigeria and Mexico. And we want this to change. We have a trade relationship where we are also, well, not only the first investors in Nigeria in stock, but we are also Nigeria's first trade partner in 2024. Nigeria's trade with the EU represented around 26% of the total. Second comes China with 14.5%. But the difference with China is that China, more than anything, sells to Nigeria, buys very little, while Nigeria has a trade surplus with the EU, a little bit more than $10 billion of trade surplus every year. And we are also the main market for Nigerian non-oil and gas exports, but still, like Nigerian foreign trade in general, our trade is very much focusing on oil and gas. And it means also that the trend should decrease, because basically the model today that Nigeria sells us crude and imports back from Europe refined products, petrol. And now, especially with the increase of refining capacities in Nigeria, especially thanks to the 𝘚𝘐𝘆 refinery, not far from here, that I had the chance to visit a few months ago, this should change. And I think it's rather a good trend, because it doesn't really make sense to send crude very far to re-import petrol here. It's not green, in fact, either. So this is something meaning that we have to diversify our trade between the EU and Nigeria. And what we want to do, and our offer to Africa and to the world, is to combine our cooperation with this willingness to enhance investment. And this we call the Global Gateway Investment Strategy. And what is new in this strategy? Basically, three things. The first is that we articulate our cooperation from the EU and from our member states, what we call Team Europe, also encompassing our two development financial institutions, which are the European Investment Bank, which is an EU financial bank, and financing projects in the EU, but also internationally, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑑. The 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑑 is not specifically EU. Actually, it has its headquarters in London. But the EU and its member states have a majority of the shares, and we consider them part of parcel of Team Europe. And the great news is that 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑑 is coming to Nigeria. Nigeria has become recently the 77th shareholder of 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑑, and in the next few months, the 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑑 will open offices here in Lagos and start operations in Nigeria and a few other West African countries. So first thing, global gateway through Team Europe. The second new development that we combine different instruments, different financial instruments, not only grants. We have 730 million euros of grants for cooperation with Nigeria between 2021 and 2027, but also loans, so through the EIB, the 𝘵𝘵𝘺𝑑 and other financial schemes, guarantees, and we are blending in operations all these instruments. We try to do more financial engineering, let's say, to really have a tailor-made offer in each project. And the third new dimension of this global gateway strategy is the fact that we partner with the private sector, with EU companies, but also with local private sector. Because what we want to do is to leverage investment, facilitate investment, accelerate investment to the benefit of the triple transition. So we are clearly focused green, digital, and inclusive. And why do we do this? Not only because it's good for business, also for us and for our companies, but more than anything because we know that if we want to reach the sustainable development goals, official development assistance is not enough. It's far from enough. What we need is to leverage private funds. And so we need to use our official development cooperation to leverage more investments. And that's what the Global Gateway Strategy tries to do. So here in Nigeria, we are focusing on several priority areas: climate-smart agriculture, renewable energy, transport, health, and digital economy. And I will take just a couple of examples. For instance, we are partnering with the Ministry of Communications and IT to roll out 90,000 kilometers of optic fiber throughout Nigeria to help connect the country. Nowadays, it's a private sector that basically connects the areas which are profitable. So leaving large areas unconnected or very poorly connected. So with this project we are partnering with, we hope very much that Nigeria will be fully connected, and beyond Nigeria, also the rest of West Africa. And the other example is the one I was referring at the beginning to help facilitate movements in this big Lagosian metropolis. It's what we call the 𝘵𝘵𝘵𝘭 project, partnering with Lagos State and 𝘚𝘗𝘀. It's about an electric transportation system, maritime. 75 electric-powered vessels going among 25 future terminals along 15 maritime routes to gain time, and perhaps when we will come from Ikeja to Lekki, we can go by sea and not by road, and perhaps we'll gain a little bit of time and not come late at some engagements. So this is a 410 million project that we co-fund with France, with the Agence Française de Développement, the French Development Agency. And again, we blend loans and grants. The grant part comes from the EU, but also there is a loan part from the European Investment Bank. So again, financial engineering with a part also of local co-funding. So a good example of what we want to do through the Global Gateway Strategy. But of course, we have a partnership that goes well beyond this. We also partner in more traditional sectors: peace, security, and defense. Of course, very important. The EU has been, for instance, financing the multinational joint task force in northeast Nigeria, including, Niger now withdrew, but Chad and Cameroon to fight jihadist groups in this region of the Lake Chad Basin. We are also providing humanitarian aid. I was in Sokoto last weekend because there is a big nutrition crisis, especially in northwest and northeast Nigeria, but also across the rest of the country. And 3.5 million children are in severe acute malnutrition, now especially in the lean season, which is starting. And this is a big challenge for Nigeria because if with the reduction of some international assistance from some partners, there is a big risk of disruption of supply of therapeutic food, which is necessary to treat these cases and help them survive. Severe acute malnutrition, if not treated, normally it's a death rate of 10 to 15%. So you know how to make calculations, apply 10 to 15% to 3.5 million children under 5, and you will figure out the number of lives at risk. So this is something that we do also with ECHO, or humanitarian office, and our member states. We provide a little bit more than 100 million euros in humanitarian aid to Nigeria every year. We also support democracy in Nigeria, especially the INEC election organizations in the country. We support rule of law and the fight against corruption, human rights, civil society organizations, gender issue, the fight against gender-based violence, for instance, and education, also a very important sector. And finally, we want also to foster people-to-people contacts. And I will come back to this at the end of my intervention. We want to do much more in terms of research and innovation. The EU has the biggest international program in research called Horizon Europe, almost 100 billion euros of financing over the programming period, 2021-2027. And it's open to international research teams, and regularly you have Nigerian teams embedded normally in international research teams that get grants, win grants from Horizon Europe. And we want also to launch the negotiation of a EU-Nigeria research and innovation agreement very soon. And migration is also, of course, a very important topic, area of partnership, because we need workforce in Europe, but we must avoid brain drain in countries like Nigeria, and we want at the same time to have orderly managed migration flows, respectful of the rights of people and protecting persons against networks of exploitation and smuggling. But at the end of the day, we must remain aware that it's not foreign assistance that makes the success of a country. Foreign assistance can only be an accelerator of a domestically impulsed sustainable development through long-term good public policies. And so the future of Nigeria lies in the hands of Nigerians, not of the EU or the international community. And this is why it is essential for Nigeria to enhance the mobilization of its domestic resources, be them financial or human. And for this, education is key, and higher education institutions in particular are fundamental. And this is also why I regularly go to universities and speak to students, because you are the future leaders of the country and you will make the difference. And so yesterday I was at the University of Abuja, I went to universities in Sokoto, in Kano, in Kefi, in many areas, and it's always very interesting to exchange with scholars and students. And our conviction that countries like Nigeria have a major role to play in the world of the 21st century to impose this model of a cooperative world and not of simple competing national interests. So we must team up, and this is why the EU is trying to enhance its partnership with Nigeria, with West Africa, but worldwide with many other nations, from Far East, Vietnam, Indonesia recently, to Latin America. We agreed on finally after 25 years negotiation with Mercosur countries, and also the modernized agreement with Mexico, just after I left, but okay. The important thing is that finally our negotiation also succeeded with Mexico, with Central Asia, many countries around the world. We are trying to reinforce our partnerships. And let me, to conclude, address two specific messages and one offer. The two specific messages, first, that nowadays it's very important to learn how to detect, avoid, and expose disinformation, to fact-check and to debunk fake news. And it's a service to you as professionals and to your community. And actually, tomorrow I will be still here in Lagos in an event we organize with the Guild of Editors on fighting disinformation and fake news. And the second one is, I think that one of the most essential challenges for Nigeria today is about gender equality. It's about empowering women and girls. Because the most populous countries in the world, and it's true also in Europe, are the ones where inequalities between men and women are less pronounced. And this is a fact which has been shown by many scientific experiments. If you take single gender groups and you compare them with a mixed gender group, be it in a classroom, be it in a research team, be it in a company, or a parliament, a national assembly, the mixed gender group is always performing better. Not only more inclusive, but more efficient and more innovative. And so we are supporting very much, in particular, the Special Seats Bill, which is now being debated at the National Assembly, because we think it's an important first step to empower Nigerian women in politics. And we think that it will be an accelerator of sustainable development benefiting to all, not only to women, but to women and men equally. And finally, the offer is, why don't we partner more? We have also a powerful offer from the EU to the students around the world and the higher education institutions. And it's called, certainly you've heard about it, the Erasmus program. It's probably the program most famous in Europe and most popular. And it gives opportunity to students to go and study in Europe for masters, the Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters, which are very special because it's not only in one university, it's in a consortia of universities. You study at least in 2 different universities and 2 different member states, and so sometimes also universities of countries out of the EU. We have also short-term exchange programs and also online exchange. But, and this is less known, we have also programs for higher education institutions on capacity building, for instance, funding partnerships between universities globally and in Europe to reinforce their capacities and their partnerships, and also to reinforce European studies. This is something that also we are trying to strengthen. And now we have also a new program out of the Erasmus program. It's called Intra-African Mobility Scheme, and it's about funding mobility for students across Africa to pay scholarships to go and study in other African countries, which was the original inspiration of the Erasmus program in Europe, enabling European students to go and study in other member states. So voilà, as our media campaign about the global gateway in Nigeria says, let's shape the future together. Thank you very much.
Can we give him a louder round of applause? Thank you very much, His Excellency. He's touched on so many things. There's a lot around collaboration, partnership, new opportunities. But there's someone that is going to do better justice as we go into the fireside chat. Please welcome, as I welcome Professor Franklin Nnaemeka Ngwu, Director, Public Sector Initiative, Lagos Business School. Please, let's clap until he takes his seat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for a very interesting lecture. But the way the clap went on, I thought I was the ambassador as I was coming off the stage. But let me assure you, Ambassador, that the questions I have are very friendly, EU-friendly questions. You can see that you are wearing a blue suit. I am wearing a blue suit. We are wearing a blue shirt, and I'm wearing a blue shirt as well. So they will be very friendly. The red is just our show of love for you. So my question will be just a few questions, and we'll take one or two questions from the audience. The first one is, Your Excellency, how will you describe the evolution of European Union partnership with Nigeria, especially in areas of governance, trade, and development cooperation? So that's the first question. Maybe I will give you 3 questions, then you can answer. Or what do you think, Your Excellency? Okay, so the second one is, the EU has invested significantly in education and research across Africa. I know you talked about some of this earlier on, but could you share some of the standout programs or success stories supported by EU in Nigeria higher education space? And then the third question will be, as Nigeria grapples with youth unemployment and a fast-growing population, what EU initiatives are focused on supporting innovation, entrepreneurship, and digital skills among Nigerians and Africa? I think if you take these first 3 questions, we can now look at time and see if we can take more questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, but it will be too easy if they're too friendly. Your questions can be also challenging. We are in the business school. We know that sometimes, we can also debate, so challenging questions are also worth. But thank you very much for the 3 very interesting questions. On the evolution of a partnership, I think what we want to do basically is, with Nigeria and Africa, is to leave behind this kind of donor to beneficiary relationship and enter into a partnership of equals. Well, this is not new. This is something we've been trying to do over the last few years. And it is based on a statement and a reality, which is that you need us, perhaps, but we need you also. You know? And as I was saying, we need you because we need you at our side to impose this model of international cooperation that we think we share. And we need you because you have some commodities we do not have, for instance, and we need. Because you have a young workforce that we do not have, and we also will need in the future. EU population from 2040 should diminish every year by 2 million people. So, meaning that migration is a necessity for us. And of course, we have to do this in a sustainable way also for countries of origin. And there are plenty of other examples. So basically, this is what inspire our partnership, is to really try to also to co-decide, not only to decide in Brussels what the content of a partnership will be, but agree on where we should partner and on which. Now, it's not always easy because, for instance, for our companies, our companies in the EU are very much risk adverse today because they have compliance rules internationally. And so if they feel they're not in a conducive environment to comply with these rules, they sometimes prefer to leave the country. That's what has happened with some EU companies in Nigeria over the last few years. But others are thriving here, and some companies are less risk adverse than others, and some also know better how to navigate and do business in countries like Nigeria while still keeping their compliance rules. But it's true that for us, having, for instance, a more conducive environment, a business environment in Nigeria is also key. So this is also something that we want to work on and help Nigeria to improve. And I think in this we are very much converging with the federal government. On education and research, success stories. Well, a very obvious one for me is the last batch, the latest cohort of Erasmus Mundus awardees from Nigeria, 103 young Nigerian students with whom we had a couple of weeks ago a pre-departure orientation event in Abuja. Of course, they came from all across the country. And Nigeria is ranking first in Africa as beneficiary of this program and is ranking 5th in the world, just behind Mexico. So my former posting. So now our objective is to get the 4th place before Mexico. Of course, it's a small cohort compared with the numbers of students in Nigeria. But for us, it's, they are future alumni and future ambassadors also of, or future bridges between the EU and Nigeria. And in research, you have regularly, every week in the newspapers, I'm reading about research teams in Nigeria getting Horizon Europe grants. 2-3 days ago, there was one about a team about a very specific microscope that they want to create, to build, and they get a Horizon Europe grants to do that. I don't remember, it was something in biology, but I don't remember exactly, not my field of expertise. But you see that there are regularly also success stories. And then in terms of innovation and digital skills, we have, for instance, here in Lagos, a digital transformation center. We have a big cooperation project in the digital area, co-funded with Germany and implemented by the GIZ, the German Development Agency. By the way, the EU is funding cooperation projects. We're not implementing them. So we are always, our funding goes through implementing partners, which can be development agencies from a member states or UN agencies, for instance, or other actors from civil society. But there must be actors which have been previously assessed and audited to make sure that they are able to comply with the very strict rules of financing management of EU funds, because we're always following very closely how each euro is spent. So on digital, it's GIZ managing, implementing this program, and we have, in fact, centers not only in Lagos but all over the country to finance young entrepreneurs, to give them skills, to help them start their business, and we are also partnering now with the Ministry of Communications and IT on the 3 million technical talents program to help train. The goal is very ambitious, 3 million young people in digital skills.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm sure we agree that he's doing very well. And I'm sure that many of you will vote for him to be a visiting professor to the Lagos Business School. So let me go back to something that you touched on before with regards to climate change, migration, and security, which I noticed that when you talked about security and defense, you got more serious. Your facial expression showed that it was very important issue. So in what specific ways does the EU envision deepening its collaboration with Nigeria and West Africa in addressing shared global challenges such as climate change, migration, and security? I think if you can answer, this is a very important question that I will want you to elaborate first before we go to other questions.
Well, climate change, as I mentioned, is a horizontal priority in all our cooperation, like gender. So we always try, for instance, we don't finance oil and gas projects, or under very strict conditions. If, for instance, it's project specifically aiming at reducing carbon emissions by these sectors. And actually, this is a dilemma for us, in particular in the gas sector, because Nigeria's gas potential is important. Nigeria wants to enhance its production of gas, and we need gas in the EU. We know that we were importing gas from Russia. We want to escape this gas dependency we had with Russia, and so we need other providers. And we've been actively seeking other providers over the last few years. So it's a dilemma for us. Should we accept to invest in gas sector, for instance, in Nigeria, or should we keep our climate-only focus? I don't know what you think, but I think this is the kind of question that we have to respond to in the near future. And climate change, so we addressed through agriculture, helping, for instance, the development of dairy value chain, the cocoa value chain. We know we have a new regulation you might have heard of in the EU called the EU Deforestation Regulation, which basically imposes to importers of products like cocoa and also soja, timber, coffee, which are, or palm oil, which are very much globally fostering deforestation, imposing to importers obligation of tracking where their imports come from and making sure that they do not come from plots which have been deforested after a cut-off date, which, if I remember correctly, is end of 2021 or 2022. So it's a challenge, including for the Nigeria's cocoa sector, and we are helping this sector to to comply with this regulation when it enters into force next year. And we are also promoting development of renewable energy, for the moment solar energy, but we're also working on the potential of wind energy, on-grid and also off-grid. And sometimes we do this also combining with another priority. For instance, we have a Solar for Health project, financing the equipment of health centers and hospitals with solar panels so that they have a constant supply of power. On migration, what we want to do is to have a comprehensive partnership with Nigeria. We've been negotiating for many years now a readmission agreement, which would replace the arrangements that each of our member states has with Nigeria to readmit Nigerian migrants who are in illegal situation in Europe and have to come back. They are returned in the framework normally of projects where they are support for reintegration in their communities of origin. But we don't have a formal agreement, and we would like to have one. But we also need to organize legal pathways of migration. And this is something that we also very much want to do, but on this we very much need our member states, because long-term residence permits are competence of our member states. But we've been designing new tools like talents partnerships, and actually we already have small programs in Nigeria with some of our member states to organize this kind of legal migration pathways to Europe. And the third aspect is the fight against smuggling of migrants and exploitation of human beings. So this is also something that we want to enhance in terms of participation, because organized crime in general is a serious concern, but when it comes to exploitation of human beings, of course, it's even more serious. And in terms of security, well, that's one of the aspects of security. What we're trying to do across the board is try to structure more our cooperation with Nigeria, or partnership, because what we see, for instance, in trade and investment, the paradox is that we are Nigeria's first partner, but we don't have any agreement, and we don't have even a regular dialogue. So this is what we are aiming at, And our first trade and investment dialogue was due to hold last week here in Nigeria, but then with the passing of former President Buhari, all official activities were suspended, so we had to reschedule this first edition of our trade and investment dialogue. And the same is true for peace, security, and defense. We were also going to have a first edition of this dialogue in Brussels, and also it has been rescheduled to after the summer break. And in security, so we want to cover organized crime and to cover peace and security issues, kinetic and non-kinetic. So we are also funding projects on peace building, for instance, in different areas of the country. And of course, on questions like cybersecurity, fight against disinformation. So we have a very large agenda also in peace, security, and defense.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. 2 more questions before we take from the audience. So I'm sure you've been to so many universities. You said you've been to Sokoto, Kefi, Abuja, and many others. But I'm sure you will agree that Lagos Business School is better than all of them. I'm sure you will agree that. So please come for Lagos Business School. I'm sure you agree that it's better than. So the question is, how can institutions like Lagos Business School better align with EU strategic priorities for Africa and become more active collaborators in policy and development discourse?
Well, I think there are plenty of opportunities within our programs, plenty of grant opportunities and partnership opportunities. With the EU, it's always a little bit bureaucratic because we always make sure, that first the call, it's always call for proposal. We make sure that our process are very fair and equal, and thorough. So it always takes a little bit of time, a lot of papers and forms to fill, but then at the end of the day, it's really worth it. And it takes a little bit of time too, but then it's also long-term projects also. We always work rather on the middle to long term. So I think the best is to go through all these opportunities and see what fits best your own strategy and objectives. But one example I was mentioning during my intervention, we have within the Erasmus program, we have the Jean Monnet actions, which are focusing on EU studies. So for instance, if you want to develop sort of a center of expertise about the EU, and business with the EU, this is something that perhaps can be funded under the Jean Monnet actions. So it can be worth. In Nigeria, there's only one European Union studies in Nasarawa State University. That's why I went there. So yeah, it's also a good unoccupied slot,
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure you heard what Ambassador said, that we should consider having a program on European studies, which we'll look into. But during your lecture, Your Excellency, you mentioned about misinformation and fake news, all that. And you also referenced a particular country, a particular region, as a major source of this misinformation in the global economy. So the question, and my final question before we open it up, is with the rising global multipolarity, how is EU positioning itself as a reliable partner in Africa compared to other global actors like China, the US, Russia, and the BRICS nations? No, generally, how is EU positioning itself as a reliable partner for Nigeria and Africa as compared to China, the US, BRICS, Russia, and other countries?
Okay, very good question. Thank you very much. But before I answer this, I forgot to mention something very important, which is another very important piece in our another ace in our game, if I may say so, which is EuroCham, the European Chamber of Commerce, which is a young chamber that was created a few years ago, but is growing very fast. It's also supported by our EU delegation, based here in Lagos. They have now more than 70 members, so 70 EU companies. And actually, we were going to have the president of EuroCham coming with us today, but he had to travel, so he could not make it. That's why he was supposed to do the pitch on EuroCham, so I forgot to do it. But this is a very important one because it's a very important partner for us, and it's like also a presence here in Lagos, because we don't have a EU delegation, a permanent presence in Lagos. And of course, they partner also with the bilateral chambers of commerce that some of our member states have. Now, on your question, we don't like so much to compare our offers because, you know, it's not like we say, okay, we are better than don't work with the others. No, of course, Nigeria is partnering with many other countries, and this is normal. And as I said myself, we are ourselves partnering with many countries around the world. Clearly, there are some with whom we don't feel in a position to partner right now because they are basically breaking all the rules of the international community. Russia, of course, is for us the most rogue state, and there are a few others. But with China, we are partnering very well. Yesterday, I was having lunch in my residence with the Chinese ambassador. We had a very candid and friendly conversation. Today, there is the EU-China summit in Beijing. And so with China in particular, we have defined our position. We are rivals in models of society and models, of course, in political models. We have competitors in economy, but we are partners in cooperation on climate, for instance. The Chinese do not like very much, actually, this, especially the rivalry part. But we have to recognize we stand for different models of political organization and society, and we are very much clear on this. But it doesn't prevent us to partner on important issues, and we have to partner. We will not solve the climate change problem without China, the highest emitter, on board, of course. What makes our offer special, I think, is the priority to sustainable development. So we always make sure that what we finance is compliant, not only with internal laws and regulations, but also with our general priorities in terms of climate change in particular, and gender. It's the fact that we respect the sovereignty of the country. We want to avoid to enter into any form of dependency. And especially, we want to avoid our partners to fall into a debt trap, like we did some decades ago. And you know that we had to have massive programs of pardoning debts or turning debts into new cooperation programs, etc. So we are very careful not to do this. And actually, this is a problem that the Chinese are facing today, because the repayment of Chinese borrowings of 1 or 2 decades ago now are starting to exceed the new financial flows coming from China. And for instance, 87% of Nigeria's external bilateral debt is with China. So this is an issue that the Chinese are now facing, the same one that we faced 30 years ago, they are facing today. They will also they are also in their learning curve, I would say, in international partnership, and so sometimes you don't avoid mistakes that others have done before you. So this is basically, I would say, what our partnership, how it is different. And also the fact that, again, it's long-term, it's with these commitments over a quite long period of time, because we have this visibility on our financial frameworks, so we know in advance how much basically we can invest in the partnership with each country. And the BRICS, it sparks many reactions and questions. The US now is very strongly opposing, BRICS participation. And in the EU, we also have this kind of debates, but we are rather, leaving partners having, meeting with whoever they like and doing the partnership they like. That's part of the sovereignty, and it's, again, a characteristic of this new world. I think the only important thing is, okay, if you sit down with the Russians, okay, that's fine, but tell them that what they are doing in Ukraine is totally wrong, and that they are violating every day the UN Charter. So, okay, discuss with them, but tell them things as they are. And I know that some of the BRICS partners do that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We have so many other questions, but just to encourage participation, we take 1 or 2 questions from the audience for you to answer. Maybe they have harder questions for you than the ones I asked you. So if you have 1 or 2 questions, please indicate by raising your hand. And just, yes, there and at the center. And please introduce yourself, your name, where you work, and your question. And please make it as brief as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bamdele Ajala. I work with Wema Bank, SMP 96. Okay, so my question is, I know that part of the things you have said today is about collaboration with the Erasmus University or education program, as it were. We've had to see capital flights from Nigeria in the last few years to the UK, more than 500 billion. And then sometimes after those large monies have left Nigeria to those other foreign nations, the Nigerian citizens are not well taken care of. You see some disturbing videos over the internet on how they were maltreated and all that. So coming to this Erasmus educational program that you're trying to tell us today, I want you to shed light on how from end to end the Nigerian people will be protected, their right preserved, and by and large, after their graduation, what is the plan within the European nation countries? Thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe I will. Maybe let's take 2 other questions. One here. Then, please go ahead. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is 𝘓𝘢𝘨𝘰𝘴 from United Capital, SMP 96 as well. I wanted to start by saying thank you. Establishing the EBRD in Nigeria is huge, just because we understand that there's a lot of development that could come out of that, from infrastructure and economic development. Whilst you were speaking, you spoke briefly about the trade and investment dialogue, which is one of the initiatives you're doing. Now, usually we find that those dialogues happen between member states like the EU and the government. But in Nigeria, a big part of the trade and investment conversation is largely being driven by a lot of private sector effort. And a lot of those conversations do not happen with the private sector in the room. Indeed, if you would add a bit of color to that, in Nigeria, you will find that a big part of the infrastructure development is now being private sector led. So the big question is, how are you looking at this? How is the EU as a region thinking about intentionally looping in private sector institutions, whether it's large corporates who are doing a lot of this work, but also financial institutions who have been here trying to break into that space, but with limited government participation? Thank you.
Thank you. And question here, last question here.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is David. I work with 𝘚𝘠𝘚, MAP 19, basically. So my question is an extension of his, basically around trade. And because what we do at 𝘚𝘠𝘚 basically is to help, people within like SMEs and businesses kind of export your products out of, Africa. But one of the major challenges is that you ship a product and the buyer bails. Like the buyer just leaves your product at the wherever at the port, and then is not paying money, and then all of that. And then sometimes you have to incur multiple costs in shipping this product back. why I'm saying this is I think we need to kind of work on, kind of develop a framework in line with our Ministry of Industry and all of that to kind of insure these products, to make sure that, I mean, there needs to be insurance because when the buyer gives you an agreement, you have an agreement you sign and everything, and then the buyer just bolts and is not paying for the product. We can't go find the person, nothing. We are at loss. And this is basically making a lot of SMEs to be discouraged when it comes to export. And that's why export from Africa is very difficult. So my question is basically, I mean, is the EU currently working on any framework in line with our Ministry of Industry kind of, you know, I think this is a major barrier. And if we do this, we could see our trade go up by like some 5% to 10%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We've taken three. I think maybe what we do is to answer these three questions, Your Excellency. And because we are gender-sensitive institution, which the EU also agrees with, we will take only questions from three ladies. Yes. And you also agree that we are doing well as gender in LBS. Our dean is MC is a lady and all that. So I'm just the only male that is trying to dilute the So the first question asked with regards to Erasmus students, Nigerian students in different EU countries, in terms of how do we strengthen and ensure that their rights are protected, that they are well looked after, and after studying in Europe, that they are given an opportunity to maybe have a better experience than just going and coming as the case may be. That's the first question. Then the second question asked about European Bank for Reconstruction and Development at the setting office in Nigeria, which is highly commendable and welcome development. So he's asking, how do we ensure that other private sectors are incorporated and involved in their operations to really strengthen and support private sector-led development in Nigeria? And following from that, the third question is talking about exports from Nigeria to EU. Most of the times, there are issues with the exports, maybe in terms of standards, in terms of the quality, in terms of... so he is asking, is there a way through which the EU is developing maybe a standard or a framework that will enable more export, that will enable more easy export of goods from Nigeria to EU? These are the three key questions. So the first one is on Erasmus student treatment in EU. Second one is on the bank operations in Nigeria involving private sector. And the third one is on how will the EU develop a framework to enable more export from Nigeria to EU? Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. First, on the Erasmus program. So the first thing we do, and actually we are doing this now, is to make sure that all Erasmus Mundus awardees, they get their visas from our member states' embassies and consulates. So sometimes we have to help them a little bit because even some of these member states do not have an embassy here, so they have to travel somewhere else to get their visa. But normally things are go more or less smoothly with that, and they can get there. And then they have all the same rights as all students and international students. There are many international students in Europe. Actually, I always say that when you go there, it's not only to meet European students, you will meet students from all over the world. And this is, I think, one of the beauties of studying there. And then in many cases, and also there it also depends of each member state, but you are allowed to have a professional experience after your studies. I know in France, for instance, the country I come from, it's the case. You can have a first professional experience, so you don't have to return immediately to your country of origin after finishing your study. Plus, sometimes in your study you also have internships and this kind of traineeships, this kind of professional experience. But you can get a paid one after studying. And then in fact, what we see that in many cases, there are students that finally manage to remain, else because their companies manage to get them a permanent visa, permanent labor permit, or because sometimes they marry there. We have many Erasmus couples and Erasmus babies. So voilà. So sometimes you can't control what people make of their lives. Sometimes they decide to settle there and marry and create a family, and it's very fine. 𝘵𝘵𝘪𝘳, what I forgot to mention is that they are very much, they are more focusing on the private sector. The EIB is rather partnering with public institutions. Not only, they also have a private activity, but 𝘵𝘵𝘪𝘳 is well complementing with what EIB is already doing because they are partnering more with the private sector. And of course, we want also private sector to dialogue with the Nigerian private sector, and this is what 𝘚𝘏𝘓𝘕 is about. You know, this is also one of the raison d'être, the reason to create this European Chamber of Commerce. We have also regularly business fora. The previous one was last year in July, shortly before I came, in Abuja. But we might have another one next year, perhaps in Lagos. I don't know. It's always a dilemma because either you do it in Abuja to be closer to ministers and officials, or you do it in Lagos to be closer to the main actors in the private sector. So it depends a little bit what you want to do. But 𝘚𝘏𝘓𝘕 is developing very much its activities. And basically what we would like to have as a first deliverable of this trade and investment dialogue is to negotiate a sustainable investment facilitation agreement. To have also like a signal to investors that they are welcome to come to Nigeria and invest. And so hopefully we can have this. Exports from Nigeria to the EU. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, diversification is the key. And for this, you need to comply with EU standards. And we're not going to lower these standards because these standards are there to protect public health and safety of consumers. Of course, they are high standards, higher than in most parts of the world. We have regularly debates also because our producers or farmers, for instance, complain very much that we are sometimes not, we are accepting imports not complying the same high standards as they have. So there is a push more and more from producers in the EU to say, hey, we have to impose the same standards also to import products. So the trend is rather to harmonize standards across the board on a high level than to lower them. So the solution to that is to help producers to comply with the standards. As I mentioned earlier, that's what we are trying to do with the cocoa value chain in Nigeria. But of course, it's also the task of governments and private organizations, business organizations, to try to do that, to develop this kind of programs. But clearly, it's also an area when we can partner in other activities. But cocoa is the most important export, non-oil and gas export to the EU. So of course, there is a specific stake here.
Excellent. Because of time, I'm appealing. We're going to take 2 questions from the from ladies. Just 2 questions, please, because of time. I believe that with 2 questions, we are still very gender sensitive. So 2 questions, one from here and from there, please. Because of time, we are going to have a cocktail where the ambassador will still be open to take more questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is 𝘓𝘂𝘓𝘁𝘓, SMP 96. So just a follow-up from the last response you gave on exports. This question is really project specific. So I would like to know if the EU is interested in investing in the Nigeria-Morocco gas line project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And question from here.
Okay, thank you, sir. My name is 𝘗𝘤𝘊𝘆𝘐𝑗𝘚. My question is MMBS 6. My question is around tourism. So tourism is an interesting industry in Nigeria, but it's not well tapped from. And I mean, there's not a lot of revenue that is coming from that stream. So what are the initiatives that is being put by the EU to promote the tourism industry in Nigeria? Maybe promoting Nigeria as a destination country in the EU, or preserving UNESCO sites in Nigeria to promote Nigerian heritage?
Thank you. Your Excellency, I'm sure you had the two questions. The first one is on the gas line, and the second one is on promoting tourism. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. On the gas pipeline to Morocco, today we are not partnering with this project. But when I refer to this dilemma that we're having, I was thinking of this project in particular. My own personal opinion is that we should do that. Depending, of course, if it's, we have to make studies, make sure that it's reliable, profitable, and everything. But I think that, gas is like a transition energy, and we need gas in the EU. So, 3-4 years before the Russian aggression against Ukraine, we did not need that. We had Russian gas. But today, in this geopolitical context, and also with this priority we have to ensure strategic autonomy, in particular of security towards Russia, I think it would deserve to have another look. But this would require to change rules we have across the board. We have something called the green taxonomy in the EU, which basically defines what is considered as a green investment. And actually, this is something we are also working on with Nigeria to define its own green taxonomy. On tourism, this week, last Tuesday, we had a meeting with the Honourable Minister of Art, Culture, Tourism and Creative Economy and our Member States ambassadors. So she pitched about a strategy to develop the sector, creative economy in particular, in Nigeria, and to create many jobs in this sector, which clearly has a potential. And tourism is a part of this portfolio. And of course, tourism, she's very much aware that international tourism, it's a challenge because of security issues in particular. But at least developing already domestic tourism is certainly possible. And internationally, there is a question of image. I think Nigeria should much more work on its image internationally. And I know that the minister is also aware of that, but it requires a lot of investment and presence in international events, etc. We are not partnering on tourism. It's not really a sector we do so much. Well, in some countries we might, but at least not in Nigeria. But we've started partnering on culture. And in particular, we have new regional projects on West African festivals, on partnership between museums in Africa and in Europe. And we are also partnering with events. We are in contact with the Lagos Biennale, for instance, to participate to the next edition in 2026. So we do culture, at least. And of course, culture is one of the elements of attractiveness for tourists. So this is what we do. But Nigeria has clearly a potential. I was last December to the Calabar Carnival, for instance. I don't know if you've been there, but it's really worth it. At the end of December, very colorful, very joyful, very nice event. The biggest street party in Africa, supposedly, and it's really big. So yeah, it's one example, but there are many others. Yeah. There's a new museum opening soon in Benin City called the Museum of West African Arts. It's being also supported by Germany, France, UK. And it will display in particular some of the bronzes which have been returned by some European countries to Nigeria, but also many other things. A very nice project opening in November. I went to the pre-inauguration last November already. And of course here in Lagos you have the John Randall Center, the 𝘐𝑩𝘢 Museum, which is quite nice. You've also, I had last time I came, touristic tour to learn a little bit more about Nigeria's Lagos history and the Afro-Brazilian community center, for instance. I mean, you have also a lot to show to tourists. It's a little bit confidential right now, but it's worth really visiting. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm sure we all agree that he has done very, very well. We're going to go to the exam room to find out if he made a distinction in his in this today, but I'm sure we all agree that he did very, very well. Thank you very much for your excellent answers to the question. Can we give him another round of applause, please? Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, and thank you, my amazing audience and our moderator. So let's give both of them another round of applause. As we bring this event to a close, I would like to invite on stage to take pictures with His Excellency the Dean, Professor Olayinka David West, and a member of the Management Board, Professor 𝘗𝘠𝘠𝘠𝘠. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. So right after the pictures, we'll have vote of thanks, and then the event part 2 continues in the foyer where you have opportunity to take pictures, engage. As you take the pictures and post them on your LinkedIn, please tag Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So, my name is 𝘓𝘓𝘠𝘓𝘧. I'm a professor of marketing here at Lagos Business School, director of the Africa Retail Academy, and on behalf of everybody, from the bottom of our hearts, we would like to say a big thank you to you. His Excellency, I'm trying to remember your name, 𝘠𝘠𝘠𝘠𝘠, something like that. Gautier Mignot. It reminds me of some good French wine, which I've had before. Thank you so much for coming to LBS. You know, as you spoke, I had a dream, and I need to share this dream. Can I share the dream? Don't be afraid. When you were saying something about how young Nigeria was, I did some quick calculation. The median age in the EU right now, median age is 45, more or less. And I'm sure you know what the median age in Nigeria is, 18. So we have an EU that is strong, experienced, wise, but you also have a Nigeria that is youthful, that is vibrant, that is energetic. And I think there's room for that intergenerational partnership. So, and if you are looking for a way to build that partnership, I think some of the people here in this audience who are part of Lagos Business School are some of those that can make that partnership achieve the objective. Do you agree with me? Yeah. So, thank you for coming to Lagos Business School. Thank you for sharing your dream, your passion, but above all, thank you for inspiring us. And I would like to thank all the other people who have come to this event for your patience and for your time. We do hope that these conversations won't just be talk, but they will lead to meaningful action for EU and for Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Uchenna Uzo. So this event, part A, is formally closed. Let us proceed to the foyer for cocktail, more conversations, pictures, share them on social media, tag Lagos Business School. Have a pleasant day. My name is 𝘓𝘂𝘊𝘆𝘂𝘐𝑒𝑑𝑖. Thank you.